Call to order a public hearing on the proposed annual budget for the town of Normal for fiscal year 2017-2018 and a public hearing pertaining to the proposed Community Development Block Grant 2017-2018 Annual Action Plan. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Gaines.
Here.
Before I do my ask three times, maybe I can get a show of hands on people who are here who want to talk to about the budget. Okay. I'm required to ask these questions three times on each item. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on the proposed annual budget for the town of Normal for fiscal year 2017-2018? Mr. Turritelli?
Mark Turritelli, 1212 Timber Ridge Court here in Normal. Some things of note in the budget. I do appreciate that we're increasing what we're spending on concrete resurfacing this year. As I mentioned last year, I'm glad to see that we're continuing the first-time home buyer incentive. I like to see that in there. But on a much bigger note, again, I would like to see more money devoted to debt reduction, to more fully funding our pensions. I would like to see a shift in priorities with the money that is being brought in from sales tax to cover those much more necessary expenditures than we are doing with some of our other projects. And again, thank you for the town staff for making all the numbers so readily available, and I think they do a wonderful job. Thank you.
Is there anyone wishing to speak on the proposed annual budget for the town of Normal for fiscal year 2017-2018? And third and final time, is there anyone wishing to speak on the proposed annual budget for the town of Normal for fiscal year 2017-2018? Next public hearing item, anyone wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed Community Development Block Grant 2017-2018 Annual Action Plan? Is there anyone here wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed Community Development Block Grant 2017-2018 Annual Action Plan? And third and final time, is there anyone here wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed Community Development Block Grant 2017-2018 Annual Action Plan? Motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines.
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for March 6, 2017. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Gaines.
Here.
We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start, some introductions are in order. We've got a star-studded room here tonight. Mayor Terry Renner from City of Bloomington is joining us, as is Jim Fruin, Alderman for the City of Bloomington, and two members of our McLean County Board, Dave Seltzer and Jim Soldner. So welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. As the discussion may go a little bit longer tonight for the benefit of the media, we are striking the request to adjourn to executive session tonight. The matters being discussed in that have been withdrawn, and so there is no need for an executive session for that tonight. So we start with the omnibus agenda. These items will be taken with one vote, and they're considered very much routine, unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused from voting on any bills I may have incurred in my duties as mayor. Mr. Fritzen?
I'd ask to be excused from voting on two Bloomington offset invoices.
Thank you. Motion for approval?
Move approval. Second.
Items considered under the omnibus agenda tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 20th, 2017, and approval of town of Normal expenditures for payment as of March 1st, 2017. A resolution authorizing the purchase of a truck-mounted airless pavement painter stripper from Kelly Cresswell Incorporated in the amount of $86,750. A resolution to award the bid for water main and service line materials to Water Products Company of Bloomington, Illinois. A resolution waiving the formal bid process and authorizing a contract for $80,000 with Larry Denton Golf Course Construction and Renovation of Taylor Ridge, Illinois. And that's for the renovation of sand bunkers at Ironwood Golf Course and approval of any necessary budget adjustments to shift funds from fiscal year 17-18 into fiscal year 16-17, given the timing of the project expenses that may be incurred before year end. A resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with Mr. Craig Onsrud for the operation of the Ironwood Golf Course Pro Shop and private golf lessons. A supplemental resolution to appropriate $1,192,300 of the town's allotment of motor fuel tax funds for the extension of Greenbrier Drive, and that's from approximately 900 feet north of Shepherd Road to Hershey Road, and the improvement of Hershey Road from Shepherd Road to Rab Road. A resolution authorizing the execution of an amendment number 3 to the intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for the Southside Boarding Platform and Auxiliary Waiting Room at the Normal Multimodal Transportation Center. And last item, an ordinance conditionally and partially approving the final plat of the Fort Jesse commercial subdivision by expedited process having to do with 1717 Fort Jesse. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have one item of general orders tonight, and that is an ordinance adopting the operating and capital investment budget for the town of Normal for fiscal year 2017-2018. Motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Before we go into discussion, if there's any from the council, we have a brief report from Andrew Hune, our finance director. Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor. As in front of you, the report is the budget document, which I know all of you are very familiar with. In terms of recapping the process that we go through each year, it starts in July, where we issue what we call the budget handbook to departments. That gives them guidance on various important dates, reports, and schedule to provide, and information we need back from them at certain times. The department heads and their staff spend probably most of August and a good part of September working on their budgets. At that point in time, the budget committee takes over, as with your guidance and your information, and we dig into the budgets to make sure we get a balance, to make sure the priorities are set, that's in compliance with what you've requested from us. We usually lock the budget down right around late November, early December, to what we call the proposed budget. The document in front of you today is called the final budget. We do make some changes between proposed and final, as you are aware. They typically are never significant changes in terms of a new program or a new position or a new service. That's all been worked out already in the proposed budget. They usually consist of what I call technical corrections or technical adjustments, which are essentially just doing small tweaks to numbers here and there. However, we do also look closely at our revenue numbers one last time. We locked the budget down in November. We haven't got a whole lot of months to look at. We have 1 or 2 more months after that to see what revenues are doing. In this case, revenues continue to struggle a little bit in sales tax and income tax. So the report before you tonight is slightly different than what we saw in the proposed budget in January. We did trim back our projections for state sales tax, local sales tax, and income tax to about $800,000 in total for all 3 of those. We did rebalance the budget on expense side to make up for that difference, and we left the general fund at its regular finance targets of 15% fund balance each year. All of our targets are within our appropriate parameters, with the exception of vehicle reserve. The last couple of years we're a little bit below our target, but that was necessary to rebalance the budget for the loss in our estimates for sales tax and local tax and income tax. Beyond that, very little changes in terms of expense or revenue, what I already told you. The budget is certainly ready to be prepared, or ready to be approved tonight, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have on the document itself.
Thank you, Mr. Huhn. Questions, comments? Mr. Fritzen?
Yeah, a comment during the public hearing about debt reduction. We do have a significant amount of bonded indebtedness. There's no question about that. But my sense is, over the years, as we've incurred these debts, that we go into them with, identified revenue sources to pay them, and we're currently, I think, about to wrap up or making a transaction here to earn a lower interest rate on some and save close to $3 million, if I remember the number right. So I guess, since that's kind of a public issue at this time, a quick review, I guess, of the debt situation, and that using the guidelines that that we have employed over the years, we're really not overly leveraged, considering our annual revenues, and maybe some explanation of that, and then also the sources of paying that debt, in an orderly, planned fashion. I mean, we hear it a lot about Uptown. How's Uptown doing? And we had identified resources to pay, the debt, because that's where a lot of the debt lies, is in the Uptown development. So if you could just give us a quick review of that, I think it'd be beneficial for everyone.
Sure. Before I go down the road too far, I do want to let you know that we have actually finished that transaction for the refunding just recently. We had a $24.7 million bond issue in 2007 that was part of Uptown renewal. We refunded $22 million of that just this last week. Our rates are favorable, and we got about $2.7 million of savings. That savings we typically take over a 5 to 6 year period. It is not in this budget document because we don't put that in until we have a known number. We have in the past, but we've kind of been more hesitant about doing that, so we left those numbers out. But in the end, that essentially reduces our debt service approximately $400,000 to $500,000 a year for the next 5 years, which is very nice. Again, not in this budget document. It'll be a mid-year adjustment during 17-18, and it does give us a little more flexibility, which is nice to have. So that transaction has been finished, and it was very nice to see that ready to come in. In terms of our debt program, this has certainly been discussed quite a bit, and I understand it. Over the last probably 13 years, the town's issued about $10 million a year in bonds. That was all orchestrated through a policy decision with the council at that time, which many of you were on, to designate certain revenue sources to fund that debt. Those sources are sales tax, food and beverage tax, or a piece of those, a piece of hotel motel, the TIF income tax, or the TIF property tax that comes in, as well as some minor subsidies from the federal government for certain debt issues that we did. So taking all those revenue sources together that were designated specifically for debt service, it gave the town a certain amount of affordability in terms of managing its debt, a certain revenue capacity, as I might say, for debt. We've always been within that capacity. In fact, we've been a bit below it in terms of our overall debt, and we can fund through our revenue sources that have been designated by the council. Right now, we're about $93 million or so in debt, which in large part has been the Uptown renewal. I have talked to the council every year about the strategies we have in place, the policies we have in place to guide those debt decisions. They've all been, in my opinion, prudent and reasonable decisions that have made an investment in the Uptown that has been successful, that's positioned the town for continued vibrant growth for the next 20, 30, 40 years with those investments, and you can see it going on right now as we speak. We discuss this debt at length with the rating agencies all the time. We don't hide from our debt levels. We talk about them openly. The rating companies say they have really multiple concerns about debt and so forth. But one thing they want to make sure is, do you have a plan? Have you put a plan in place to pay for this debt? Is it manageable? And all those answers are yes. They're comfortable with the level of debt we have. because of the plan that's gone through this and because of the process of the policy-making decisions for the revenue to set aside for that money. And they know that that the town is in a period of time when it's transitioning to a renewal source for its uptown area. And there's going to be debt and investment that's needed to make that happen, to make the town continue to be vibrant and successful in the future. So the conversations I've had with folks in the community and with this council and with the rating agencies has been along those lines. They say, yep, we get it. You know, the debt is planned, it's manageable. You have policies in place to make sure it continues to be manageable going forward. I have mentioned that, you know, we are kind of at that revenue capacity stage for the identified revenues now. Any additional debt in the future, we would need to identify revenue that's currently with the town or carve out some kind of process in the budget to say this revenue is now going to be dedicated to this debt issue. But again, it's as long as it's thoughtful, and it always has been. Each bond issue has been very thoughtful. We've done pretty good in terms of interest rates, and over the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've been refunding several of our debt issues. This is our fourth or fifth one refunded now. So we were right around 4.5% rate. Now we're down closer to the low threes. So it's really in a maintenance phase right now. It was a ramp-up phase for many years in terms of the debt and the investment into Uptown to make what's happened happen. And now the maintenance piece of that is simply to watch for refundings and get them done when we can and bring that debt cost lower. It frees up capacity in the future for that refunding. And each debt issue we look at will be a case-by-case basis now going forward. That was kind of a long-winded answer. Hopefully it addressed some of those questions that you had mentioned.
Yeah. I need to emphasize your comment about additional debt. We'd have to identify a revenue source within current revenues.
Correct.
We're not talking about any new revenue source, any additional fees or taxes or anything like that, if and when we come to that point where we decide to have another bond issue.
Correct.
I have one question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but we no longer have any variable rate bonds anymore. All our rates are fixed rate bonds. Is that
Correct. Our very first bond issue was a variable rate bond, and we refunded that many years ago when it looked like the market was shifting away from variable rates. And a lot of that occurred when a lot of insurance companies started increasing their fees to cover certain liquidity and remarketing requirements of that debt. So even though the interest rate was relatively favorable compared to a fixed rate, some of the charges we were going to get to maintain that liquidity from the companies was getting pretty extensive. So the council decided to go ahead and fix that rate, which was very favorable. I think we're, again, the high threes at that time. So we have no variable rate debt at this time.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Hey, just a quick follow-up, more informational than anything. Been out talking to residents in the last few weeks around town, and some questions about, I know over the last 4 or 5 years, as you've mentioned, we've done 4 or 5 of these. How are we able to go out and save money on these bonds? What are the factors? Why have we been so successful? I don't know if you have a number about how much savings we've got, but how have we been able to do that? What have been the factors that allowed us to save so much money?
Sure. We're probably a little under $7 million total savings, I believe, in all the debt issues in terms of savings. And honestly, to gain those kind of savings, well, first, anyone will get savings if you issue a debt. You know, when we did back in the early 2000s, because rates were what we thought fairly low, 4.5%. Now we realize that was fairly high. You know, in our world today. Of course, our interest income also is fairly low too. On the other side of the fence. So the timing was part of it. You know, we had some long debt out there, which made sense because the interest rates were well low in the out years, and the time came to refund those. It worked well, but probably the significant piece of that is you have to be a credit-worthy place. You know, you have to have policies in place at all levels of the government within the finance department, within the city manager's office, within the council chambers, and we refer to it as our AAA status. That's where I'm going basically with this. Okay. In Illinois, you know, we've got a bit of a dark cloud over our head because of the state of Illinois' finances. But a AAA is probably the most shining light we can put on that, and talking to our financial advisors and the rating agencies, that underlying AAA status, which essentially says we're well-managed, strong policy, financial roadmap, we do what we say, we have a plan on what we're trying to do, and we execute that plan. That's what gets you a AAA status, and that AAA status translates into basis points of savings. The market obviously has gotten softer since the early 2000s, so we took advantage of that with the refundings, and the additional pickup there is simply our AAA status and our financial wherewithal that we're able to show to the marketplace.
Ms. Lorenz?
As long as we're talking about interest rates, let's go to the other side of that and speak a little bit to the pension funding. Can you give us a summary on how we're doing towards that? An opinion was expressed tonight with
Sure.
some concern about that.
For me, when we do the budget, it's all a balancing act. So you need to fund things that are appropriate, and we fund things based on the priority of the council. If we have a plan of funding and the plan is viable or it's even above the minimum, then I'm very comfortable where we're at. I'd like to have a higher percent funded. That's who doesn't want to have that. The fact that ours is the high 50s and low 60s, depending on the police or fire plan, is not ideal. No doubt about it. Again, we don't run from that number. However, in talking again, I refer back to the rating agency. That's kind of the people I need to convince sometimes of where we're at with this stuff. They know that we're not alone with those levels. They look at it and say, well, what's your plan? And they know for years we've had a plan to fund above the minimum. We have actuaries tell us what the contribution needs to be. We make that contribution every single year. In fact, we make a contribution over and above what the state minimum is, which isn't a big difference, but we're above that minimum. We're shooting for 100% by 2040. It takes time. These are big barges to move, and you can throw more money at it, but then you're sacrificing somewhere else. And if you have a funding plan that will get you to where you want to be, that the industry recognizes as prudent and reasonable, then you stay with that plan. Now the council has twice changed that plan to be more aggressive, and that buys us a lot of credit with the rating companies in terms of what our plan is. It's very stable. We've decreased the rate twice, and the assumption for the interest rate that's increased the contribution. So they like seeing that. So I can't recommend anything more than we already have discussed about talking about the interest rate assumption again, and the council is well aware of that conversation. That's the one piece. That's the one linchpin in all pension funds. Is if you're funding on a good policy and it makes sense, are you hitting your interest assumption? And ours is relatively low compared to our counterparts across the country, but it's not low enough, and you're aware of that, and we'll be looking at ways to address that. So. Again, I'm comfortable with it in terms of where that pension funding plan is. If we didn't have a plan, if it was haphazard, if it wasn't actually determined, if the council refused to talk about interest rate assumptions and discuss increases in funding, then I would be uncomfortable. But that has never occurred in my tenure here. It's always been a receptive group and a group that was willing, when I say group, I mean the council, willingness to address it and get in front of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Gaines?
Well, in saying that, I've been on the council many years now, and I was on the council when we took the step to determine to become debt-free.
Sure.
That put us in a position to then move forward with the Uptown and be able to take on debt. And there's never been anything that's been haphazard about this the whole way we've been here. The council, some of the faces have changed, some of us haven't. But it's been a steady ship, and I guess that's what feels so good is, as you said, we talk about it, and we make plans. And that's the one thing Normal has done, is we don't make plans and put them on the shelf. We make plans and we work them. And that's what we've been doing. And when we started the whole Uptown, Kent Carricker was our mayor at that time, and that was his famous saying, we're going to plan our work and we're going to work our plan. And we all kind of jumped on board and said, that's absolutely right. And that's how we've gotten to where we are today. And so when it comes to saying, oh, we're overly in debt, we have those, we planned. We didn't go into debt and do a bond issue and think, oh, maybe we can pay for it or not. We knew what that funding stream was going to be from the very beginning. And with that, it's remained that way. So there's not been a time that there has had to be panic. There's not been a time when we had to go, I wonder what we're going to do about this debt now. No, we have a plan. It's working. And we've gained a lot. We've gained a lot of brick and mortar. We've gained a lot of income. We've gained a lot of real estate tax in the long run. We've gained all kinds of quality of life in our community because of what we've done. Normal stands out. Normal shines in that way. And so I certainly hope, as I'm going to be leaving the council here in a month or so, I certainly hope that the council does not determine, oh my gosh, we've got to panic and do something very different and try to get this paid off, because that will truly be disastrous, because it won't work, because it will not have been planned.
I think it's probably important to put a number on what you're talking about, because with the planning, the infrastructure, the land assemblage, other things that we did in the Uptown, $14 million worth of replacing old sewers and water mains and updating electrical and things like that has generated over $200 million of private investment in the town of Normal. And that's a pretty significant number and a pretty good investment in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Further questions for Mr. Hume? Thank you, Andrew. Further discussion on the budget? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Cruz?
Aye. The budget is approved. We move on to new business, and the first is a presentation to the council by Heartland Community College President Rob Widmer, and he's bringing a student along with him to verify that everything Rob says is true.
Council members, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Peterson, thank you very much for having the opportunity to provide a brief update on Heartland this evening. As I'm sure most of you know, at least, last year we celebrated our 25th anniversary as an educational institution in this community. Having celebrated that means we have been providing accessible, high-quality, affordable education and training opportunities to our district residents for over 25 years now. We're very, very proud of that. We've been contributing to the growth and development of our workforce. An example of our engagement in the community in that regard is BN Advantage and the initiative of BN Advantage, which is very much focused at this point in time on aligning education and workforce needs. So we're very much a part of looking at that mix of needs of the workforce, labor markets, and our employers. And we're very, very pleased to be part of that advantage, and we think that is really an important initiative for our community, and we want to be very instrumental in helping influence the direction of that and how education plays a role in moving our local economy forward. In training the workforce, we've had, I think, a significant impact, and we do have a significant impact. We have approximately 5,000 credit students today. It varies from year to year, but roughly 5,000 credit students. And when I talk about credit students, I'm talking about students who are interested in transfer to a four-year institution, another educational institution, who are pursuing an Associate Arts, Associate of Science, or Associate in Engineering Science. We have nearly 40 different programs of study in those transfer areas. In addition to that, our credit programs are focused on employment as well, career training. And those are what we refer to as associate in applied science degrees. We have about 23 different programs of study there. And in certificate programs, which are shorter than degree programs, we have about 45 different certificate programs. So the breadth of opportunities we offer, I think, is extensive, and we're very proud of that. We've come a long way over our 25 plus years now in growing and expanding those opportunities. In addition to that, the credit programs, we have a lot of opportunities for other learners in the community who are perhaps not as interested in the credit opportunities. In any given year, we'll serve between 12 and 15,000 other learners in personal enrichment opportunities, in customized training for our organizations, business, and industry in the community. And we'll also be focusing even more so in the near future on continuing professional educational opportunities, where folks might need to pursue continuing education units for their professional certification. So we'll try to make those resources available. Through our personal enrichment and our continuing education area, we often partner with a variety of organizations, institutions to provide needs in the community. And I'm proud to mention one that we have put together with the cooperation of the town Parks and Rec and our folks in continuing ed to have a summer camp adventure for youth in the community who are will spend part of their day, half their day with the Parks and Rec Department and the other half with educational opportunities at the college. And this is really an example of a partnership between the college and the town where we've looked at a need and an opportunity and been able to pull that together. And there'll be a lot more information coming out on that across the community in the very near future. Through our personal enrichment, we have foreign languages, we have computers, we have photography, we have project management, leadership training, pharmacy tech, to name just a very few. And we have obviously the very popular traffic safety school, which we happen to be the home for traffic safety school as well, which contributes to some of our numbers on those non-credit learners. I'm really also very proud to mention, as we talk about those kind of numbers and our enrollments in general, that in the last 5 years, there's been some data recently generated for community colleges, and there's 48 different community colleges across the state of Illinois. And our enrollments, while we hit a slight downturn a few years ago, we have been growing the last 5 years. If you look from 2013 through 2017, we have been growing while nearly every other community college in the state has been declining over that 5-year period. And in fact, we're one of 3 community colleges in the state of Illinois that through that 5-year period from 13 to 17 has experienced a overall gain in enrollment, where we've increased about 2.5% in that period. If you look at community colleges in general across the state during that same period, community colleges on a statewide average have declined in enrollments over 17%. So we feel very fortunate. We feel we're doing some things very well when it comes to serving our students' needs and attracting students through our doors and serving our constituents here in the community. Just as an example, we have spent a lot of time achieving those numbers through a focus on student progress, persistence, and persistence toward completion. You hear a lot of that in higher education about completion numbers, and we're very focused on that. We spend a lot of time and energy committing to the success of our students, and that's one of our primary college-wide objectives and initiatives and priorities is the success of our students. Our fall-to-fall persistence for students coming back one fall after the next, the persistence and completion is consistently improving to the point where we're over 50% at this point. From a fall to spring persistence, that keeping them from in the same year, we're running consistently improving from year to year, and we're over 70% this spring in that regard. As we look at a completion measure for students who start with Heartland Community College and have the ambition to complete their bachelor's degree, and with community college students who tend to take a little longer because they're probably working. They have families they're trying to support and a variety of other social commitments. We look at 6-year outcomes. And a recent cohort of 6-year outcomes for students who started at Heartland and completed a 4-year degree. Heartland is nearly 3 times better than the national benchmark. So we feel very, very good about that number. It still has a long way to go in terms of the actual raw number, but we feel very good about the fact that we're very much beyond the national benchmark number. So student success is very important to us. We try as an institution to promote first and foremost student success, no matter whether you're the frontline faculty member or you're an administrator or you're the custodian or the secretary. Everyone focuses on student success. They're our primary motivation. That's why we're here in the community and serving the needs of our community. And who better to speak to student success than a student? And so I've had the pleasure to bring with me this evening a young man whose name is Mason Aberly. He's a graduate of University High School. He's a local student, local resident, in his first year with us here at Heartland. And I'll ask Mason if he would speak a little bit to his experience at Heartland, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, President Widmer. Thank you, council members and Mayor Coos, for having me this evening. As the president mentioned, I was a U-High graduate in the year 2015. When I graduated, most of my friends and fellow students were, starting their first experience of moving out and going to different colleges, which was very great for them, very scary for their parents. And so I figured that I would follow in the footsteps of Robert Frost and take the road less traveled. And so I'm glad that one got a chuckle. And so when I graduated, instead of going to college like I should have, I took an internship and a job in Jerusalem, Israel, and left for the year, which was great for me and very scary for my parents. When I was over in Jerusalem, I actually got an email from a student government member who said, hi, we don't know if you'll ever be coming back, but when you do, we think that you'd be great for a position here with the student government. And because of the work that I was doing over there, my thoughts for college education were really few and far between. I wasn't filling out college applications. I had no intention on doing that. I kind of had bigger fish to fry. And so I started to look a little bit more into Heartland, and that's, I suppose, when all the gears started to turn, and I realized, yeah, that seems like a pretty good option. So that's how I got introduced to Heartland, although I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I was really introduced 4 years earlier in that much beloved traffic safety school. So it was really my second introduction to Heartland. So I interviewed for a position with the Student Engagement Office as the student government president. Luckily, that went well, I suppose, as my first official business on Heartland's campus was as the student body president, and I currently serve in that capacity. At Heartland, I'm pursuing a double major in economics and political science, which is where I sort of got a gasp from my folks, but they had dealt with worse from then on. And so that, I suppose, is really where it's left me. President Widmer mentioned that he supposes that they must be doing something right at Heartland. Just given our numbers, I can attest specifically to the culture that's going on campus, which has been my aim as student president, to make it a culture where, although we're non-residential, it does feel like home, frankly speaking. And I think that thing that they're doing right at Heartland, for what it's worth, is that I think in order to be capable and have the capacity to give love and affirmation to another person, you first have to love and devote yourself to something higher than yourself. And at Heartland, I think that they have devoted themselves so wholeheartedly to pursuing education and to teaching kids, to teaching students like myself, teaching non-traditional students. They've devoted themselves to that task so wholeheartedly that I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's contagious to the whole student body, but also to the community. And so I personally thank you for your ongoing support of Heartland and for the great work that you're doing with our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mason. I know you have a full agenda tonight, so I could go on and on for hours and hours, but I won't do that to you tonight. So be happy to answer a question or two if there's questions, and we can go from there.
Mr. McBride.
Not so much a question, but just a comment. As some folks in the room know, I'm a product of a community college myself. I hope that doesn't deter anyone. Chuckle, lumps. But it means so much. You mentioned, President Whitmer, earlier the term accessibility, and that is accessibility to education and the ability for people to improve themselves is so important, and it means so much to have a first-rate institution in our community, and we're so proud of you, particularly with what you're facing in the face of the state environment, which we all are. So we wish you continued success, and to you as well, Mr. Aberle, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy, and then Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you both. To say you're an impressive young man is an understatement. Thanks for your comments tonight. I just want to say thanks for being creative leader in the community. And some business initiatives here in the community spearheading around education. It's such an important part of, I think, the future of our whole entire community. Us being able to produce talent that's readily available and needed in the marketplace, STEM-related careers. I said STEM for Mr. Fritzen's benefit. But just a bit of a shout out. You're doing many partnerships in the community, but just wanted to highlight the one you're doing with Unit 5 to do some dual credit to help kids right out of high school be ready to get current contemporary jobs in the marketplace is a hard to place a value on partnership.
Yeah, we're very pleased with that partnership. Dr. Daniel and I just did a presentation earlier today, which Ms. Lorenz was at that session where we talked about the partnership we have with Unit 5 in terms of a lot of our dual credit opportunities, which allows students to take college credit while they're juniors and seniors. But even more impressive, I think, is the fact that we've now put together, along with Unit 5, the opportunity for select Unit 5 students who are identified in their 8th grade year to attend Unit 5 and simultaneously achieve an associate arts degree with a concentration in computer programming and their high school diploma, so that when they're graduating from high school, they're also graduating with an associate's degree. And that's a very intense program that involves a lot of our dual credit programs, taking classes on campus, as well as the dual credit that's available through the high school, some advanced placement, and very rigorous coursework that includes 2 calculus courses before they get out. So.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of those programs to come right out of high school and be ready to go into the workforce, because not everybody wants to go to a 4-year university, right? And there's going to be plenty of opportunities, and most of the jobs over the next decade or two are forecasted to come out of technology and predominantly STEM-oriented careers, and we're woefully underprepared for that future right now. So what you're doing is really important. So thanks for your work.
Ms. Lorenz.
That was the issue that I wanted to raise, was just the remarkable collaboration that is going on between you and Dr. Daniel. You spoke today at lunch about that. So I just want to, again, applaud that. So thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Thank you. It hard for me to believe that you guys just celebrated your 25th anniversary. I can remember we grew up family friends with a gentleman by the name of John Astroth, and I remember my dad and him and me and one of John's sons going over to what was at that point, a growing campus, but growing from dirt up. And I remember climbing on a little utility building that was, in my mind, about 100 feet tall, in reality, probably about 8 feet tall. And to see how far the campus has come from that point, but certainly even in the last decade or so. You know, one of the greatest assets that draws people to this community is our educational institutions. And what you guys do, thank you for being a tremendous partner to this community, a tremendous asset, a tremendous resource. We really appreciate what you're doing and continue to be behind you and support you as you keep moving forward and keep Heartland great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, just, I can't help but I also am a proud product of a community college education. I got my Associate of Arts degree, and that's where I first was introduced to local government as a career, and gee, look where it brought me.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that, and I frankly believe that I had, when I eventually transferred over to a larger university, I had as good, if not a better, educational foundation than a lot of the students that had been at the university for their entire tenure. So it was certainly the right decision for me, and I'm a big believer in community college education. My son's a proud Heartland student, and he also went through the traffic curriculum, so he learned both. And but that being aside, I do want to say, I think our community doesn't know how fortunate we are to have Heartland Community College here. It is such a tremendous community resource on so many levels, and Heartland has worked so hard to be that really positive member of the community, giving back in many ways, filling gaps where gaps needed to be filled and there was nobody else to fill them. Heartland would step in and say, we'll do that. Challenger Learning Center is one that comes to mind. What a great program that is, and that's something that you did not have to do, but you guys took it on and have done a great job with it. We partnered on the Corn Crib, which has been a tremendous community asset. But so many things that Heartland makes available to the community, aside from bright young people like Mason, but just the community in general. We're just very fortunate, and I'm glad that those people that founded Heartland persevered through some rough early times. There was some pushback, but they persevered, and it is unquestionably a outstanding facility. I want to also just indicate to President Widmer, we have a great working relationship, and I so value that, and I just appreciate, if we need something, and Heartland is always right there to help and do whatever's needed, and we certainly try to reciprocate. So thank you, President Widmer, for your great work. You're involved in all kinds of boards and commissions and committees. I'm sure you're going every morning, every night, but it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, council members and Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
And thank you for excellent presentation, reminding us what a true community asset we have in that community college.
Thank you.
Our next item is a motion to approve appointments and reappointments to various boards and commissions and committees. Motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
As this is a matter of personnel, there will be no discussion unless a council member would like to take this item to executive session. And seeing no such request, please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Ms. Gaines, would you read our lengthy list of appointees there?
We do have a lengthy list, but we're pretty fortunate that all these folks are willing to serve. Reappointments include Alan Sender to the Bloomington Normal Airport Authority, Tom Anderson to the Building Board of Appeals, as well as Rich Weitengruber. Historic Preservation Commission is Nancy Armstrong. The Planning Commission, Michael McFarland. Police and Pension Board is Andrew Bender and Robert Weldon. Sister City Committee is Marianne Sherman and Akiko Wilson. Uptown Design Review Commission is Charles McGuire and Rick Kensler. Zoning Board of Appeals is Todd Anderson and Corinne Brand. So these are reappointments. We do have some new appointments, and those include on the Building Board of Appeals, Tim Bassett, Paul Charnett, and Paul Schultz. The Uptown Design Review Commission is Kyle Glandon. And we thank everyone for their service, and look forward to another good year.
Thank you. Item 9 is a council discussion concerning the recent action by the City of Bloomington to unilaterally terminate the Metro Zone Agreement. Don't need a motion on this one. We are in discussion. I'll start with a few comments, and we'll go into discussion with the council. We felt the need for this going forward to have this a very public discussion. A lot of discussion going into this has been in behind closed doors, in meetings between some council members and staff. Obviously, this situation has gotten to a point that is not good for our community. It is a problem for our community that the two municipalities are not in agreement on that. And I think we've got a little work to do moving forward to get to that point, but I think I will speak for my council and likely speak for the city of Bloomington that our end goal is to get together and to resolve this issue for the betterment of the two communities. We don't always agree. We may not agree here, but it is critical that we find common ground and consensus to move forward as a community. And there are some things that we feel we need to talk about publicly tonight, some issues that we need to put some clarity on, and so we're going to have that discussion tonight here at the table. To give some background, we're going to start with Mayor Paul Harmon. We thought it was appropriate because Mayor Paul Harmon was at the table and helped craft the agreement. He can give us some background on the intention of the agreement, what the philosophy behind creating the Metro Zone was, what the hopes were at the time that he did that, because nobody knew what would come of that agreement. So, Mayor Harmon, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Coos. It's really too bad after such a very positive report from Heartland College, and I have to agree with all of you how important that is to our two communities and to the whole county, that we have to switch to a subject like this, which is a disappointing discussion that we have to have. I want to do a couple of things tonight. I, first of all, want to give a little background on how we got to the Metro agreement. Jeff is the only one up there who's still here from when we got to the Metro agreement. And I want to do a little bit on BN Advantage as the immediate past chair of BN Advantage, having just stepped down at the beginning of February. There have been some comments about how the Bloomington decision supposedly will help BN Advantage. So I want to make some comments about that also. And Cheryl, we started paying the debt down when I was mayor, before you were on the council. We issued no bonds after the bonds that were issued for the Diamond Star facility. You are all to be congratulated on paying off that debt and having the fiscal wherewithal to do what you've done since. A little bit of background. There'll be some people in the room who really don't know who I am, but I've been involved with the town, the city, and the county in one way or another since 1972 on different boards, commissions, committees. I've been on the council and mayor of the town of Normal. Following that, I was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development for the Bloomington Normal area, which was the umbrella agency for the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Council, and the CVB. That's a group that has since been disbanded, and the three entities are now separate again. But I was chairman of that, so I feel like I have some background in what the economic development policies of the community have been for a long time. I was then on the airport board for 17 years and chaired it for 9 years. And obviously the airport has a lot to do with both of the cities and with commercial development on the east side of Bloomington. I have then, from November of 2015 to February of 2017, I chaired the Leadership Council of the Bloomington Normal Advantage, the group that is trying to bring about economic development for both cities and the county as a whole. In February of 1985, when I was running for mayor for the first time, the Pantograph editorialized that there were 3 major issues facing the town of Normal. And number 1 was economic development in cooperation with Bloomington. The other 2, I know you're curious, what would the other 2 be? Expected reduction in federal assistance. There were direct grants to the cities at those times. And a largely mitigated problem of what were then large student parties that disturbed neighbors. Those were the 3 major issues. The Pantograph went on to say that I was well-versed in all of those issues. So, as to the enterprise zone and the metro zone, Mayor Godfrey of Normal was the first person contacted about the possibility of Diamond Star locating on the west side of the 2 communities, and that was at some point in 1984, early on. Early on in those discussions, Mayor Godfrey contacted Mayor Buchanan of Bloomington to see if Bloomington would be interested in participating in the Diamond Star development. And Mayor Buchanan said, he must talk to his council, but Mayor Buchanan said yes, Bloomington would like to participate. So in late 1984, the 2 cities created the enterprise zone. And the enterprise zone was to benefit Diamond Star primarily at that time, but it covered the whole west side. But it wasn't until late summer of 1985 that Diamond Star committed to come to the site on the west side. I'd been mayor since mid-April and had participated in 2 private presentations to Mitsubishi and Chrysler as they were making their final decisions. After the Diamond Star commitment, the 2 cities then looked to memorializing their development partnership on the west side, known as the Metro Zone. So the Metro Zone was created after the Diamond Star commitment was made. Metro Zone was not finalized until January of 1986. The Metro Zone is a comprehensive infrastructure and public services agreement for the zone and was not specifically for Diamond Star, but was for the entire Metro Zone. And it was envisioned to be a development area to benefit both cities. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say at the early stages how involved the county also was in all of these discussions. The only reason to enter into the agreement would be to make it of a permanent nature. Otherwise, there would be a potentially disastrous unwinding of infrastructure and public service obligations. So I always felt, and I know Dave Anderson, who's sitting in the back of the room, city manager at the time, also felt that this was a permanent agreement. Having said this, the agreement does provide 2 safety mechanisms. One, it can and has been amended. So if there are issues, they could be addressed and amendments could be made. The other is the 2 parties can mutually agree to end the agreement. I didn't anticipate that would necessarily come into fruition, but if problems arise and you negotiate your way out of a contract. So as of now, the Metro Zone agreement has not been terminated in accordance with its terms. And this to me means that 1/2 of the income generated in the zone, with some exceptions, is Normal's income. It is not Bloomington's money being given in recent years to Normal, but actually is Normal's money in the first place. 1/2 of the income, 1/2 of the expenses. It didn't say where it was raised. It didn't say where the expenses were incurred. It was a split. So without going into the legal details, it seems to me that Bloomington has breached the contract with Normal. And what we have here And I don't want to get into legalities because I know there are arguments all over the place on legalities. But we have a real moral issue. Moral issue is, can you trust your partner? I've wondered about saying this next part. My wife has advised against it. But I think I shall go ahead anyway. You know, it was said 3,000 years ago that you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, you shall not covet your neighbor's house or anything that belongs to your neighbor. It seems to me, in my own mind, and based on my background, that Normal's property has been taken from Normal. And it should have been done in accordance with the terms of the agreement. And the way you get out of a contract is not necessarily cheap, but you pay something if you want to get out of the contract. I would now like to briefly turn to Bloomington's argument that terminating the Metro Zone is helping to carry out the goals of Bloomington Normal Advantage Initiative. As chairman of Bloomington Normal Advantage Leadership Council from its inception in November of 2015 to February 2017, I can simply say that to say that somehow Bloomington Normal Advantage will be helped by this termination of this agreement in the way that it was terminated is somehow beneficial is, in my mind, is just wishful thinking and self-justification. Let me read a small portion of the Bloomington Normal Advantage Development Strategy. As the overarching goal of the Economic Development Strategy is to diversify the Bloomington Normal metro region's economy, perhaps the most important building block to achieve this is to create a stronger regional approach which is embedded in the community's DNA. This begins with the elected and public leaders of McLean County, City of Bloomington, Town of Normal. The boundaries that define McLean County, Bloomington, and Normal are essentially irrelevant in today's global economic development arena. Companies and executives see the region as a singular economic market, and the distinction between the county and the incorporated municipalities have little to no bearing on where they decide to invest and create jobs within the region. What is of great importance to decision makers and decision influencers in business locations is how well government and businesses work together, how well different governmental units work together, and how business-friendly a region is. A problem in one community should not be interpreted as a stroke of good fortune for neighboring communities. If there is a political, fiscal, or budgetary instability in one community, it impacts all communities in the region. This is the fundamental premise underlying the importance of the need to enhance and advance a unified region. It is the mission critical to realizing the community's overarching goal to diversify Bloomington Normal's economy. Let me assure you that since April 2004, when Bloomington first raised serious concerns about the Metro Agreement, the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Council, and later BN Advantage Leadership Council tried to help resolve this crisis, and no one, to my knowledge, supported Bloomington's unilateral action in this matter. Now, there are many arrangements that do not always benefit people equally. They're not always equally fair to both parties. Two major ones in this community. One is CIRA. Both communities pay exactly the same property tax rate to support the airport. All economic development around the airport, and an airport does create a lot of economic development, goes to the benefit of Bloomington. None of it goes to the benefit of Normal. I have yet to hear anybody in Normal say we should get out of CIRA because we're not benefiting, because we do benefit in another way by having the service. Another is the sanitary district. The new plant on southeast of Bloomington greatly benefited Bloomington through a gravity flow system. It cost Normal millions of extra dollars to have to pump up over the ridge in order to use that plant. Normal pays the same rates. The normal citizens pay the same rates for the sanitary district, but they cost them more to be part of it. So these are just two examples. You can go on with a long list of things where where benefits are not necessarily equal to the participants, but the participants participate because they are of an advantage to do things together. So that's what I had for my remarks, and I will be glad to take questions if there are any.
Questions for Mayor Harmon? Thank you.
And you're most welcome.
So we go to discussion. Would anyone like to start with comments?
Oh, what the heck.
Mr. McBride?
You know, like everybody in this room, I've been giving this a lot of thought, and thank you, Mayor Harmon, for your presentation and your background, and chiefly for all the work you've done over the years on behalf of the entire area. It's much appreciated, and it's always important, I think, when we sit here, and particularly as a relative newcomer to this body, that we always keep in mind all the work that was done by those who came before us, and the fact that as we sit here, we're merely stewards, because it's our job to best situate those who come after us. So, I've been an advocate of the big picture, the long view, and I think sometimes we get a little caught up in short-term problems or short-term perspectives. I think it's important to note and remember that we're a small community, and therefore most of us all know each other. I know the 9 aldermen, certainly, some better than others on the city council. I know Mayor Renner, and it's good to see a couple of the aldermen here tonight. And I believe, and I know, that every single one of them are in public service because they love their community. And I think that's the case of all the people here. I think that's the case of all of you who showed up tonight. We care about our community. So it's important to keep that in mind. I do think that somehow perspectives have spun out of control on some of these things, and perhaps there's enough blame to go around on that. I don't know. Maybe we haven't fully appreciated just the impact of seeing what that number looks like when that check comes from Bloomington to Normal annually. Maybe we haven't appreciated that enough. On the other hand, I think, going back to what Mayor Harmon said, I don't know that maybe some folks on the other side of Division Street have fully appreciated the fact that we have invested so much over the life of this agreement. And you don't make investments just to say, okay, we made our money back, now we're clean. You make investments for long-term gains. And I also don't know that folks over there fully appreciated that this may, from our perception of things, put us in a situation where we now feel like we're forced to make a decision between collaboration and the goal of the larger community, and also doing right by our taxpayers. We should never have to make that choice. I don't think anybody in Bloomington would want to make that. There's no reason we can't have both. So I guess in my kind of final analysis on this, I don't know about you, but some of the back and forth and the ongoing discussions has taken a toll. It's wearing me out. I don't know that I find it interesting. I certainly don't find it entertaining. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we need to get back to the table as soon as possible to start talking about the big picture stuff, and that includes this. And I think we go back to the table. I don't think that we necessarily have to accept that Bloomington's presence, that their unilateral decision to get themselves out of the metro zone is valid. On the other hand, I don't think Bloomington necessarily has to accept that our opinion, that it's invalid, is valid. I think we just need to get back to work. We can set that aside for now and start getting to work. Most people, day in, day out, don't think. There are spots in town where I have to stop and think, okay, I'm in Bloomington or Normal. Most people don't think of it day to day. Oh, this is Normal, this is Bloomington. We shouldn't think of it that way either. We're Bloomington Normal. More than that, more than being, quote unquote, Bloomington Normal, this is home. This is my home. This is our home. And I think we should always remember that first. So Surely we have some disagreements. I think we have a strong case for disagreeing, and I understand the perspective of those in Bloomington for feeling the exact same way. So let's roll up our sleeves and get back to work.
Thank you. Ms. Gaines?
Thank you. I think that was very well said. We're neighbors. We're kind of like siblings. And sometimes there's sibling rivalry, sometimes there's some fighting and all of that goes back and forth. And as a counselor, I work with a lot of families where there's a lot of fighting. So I am trying to teach people how to mediate, negotiate, and work through things. An effective parent doesn't just say, no, you're wrong and you're right and whatever. It's being an effective parent means you help your kids learn how to work through things. And unfortunately, right now we're at that place where we need to learn how to work through things. It does no good. We have lots of other cities in the central Illinois that would love to take the bright spot from the Bloomington Normal area. We've been a shining star for a long time, and we need to work to remain that. It just doesn't happen because, oh, geez, it seems like that's a good idea. It happens because we work at it. And when we can't sit down and talk, we're never going to work out anything. You just can't. So, my hope is that we can sit down and we can have discussion, throw out lots of ideas, collaborate, not just cooperate, but collaborate, which means you come up with even better idea from the two people or the two entities that are bringing their best ideas to the table. So that's my hope. It's my wish, because I love this community and I don't want to see it kind of rolling down a hill because people decide they don't want to talk.
Ms. Lawrence?
Thank you. I'm going to take a page from the playbook of a pastor that used to be at my church. And on certain Sundays of the year, well, on most Sundays of the year, he just gave his sermon and kind of extemporaneously and with no notes. But on certain Sundays, he developed a page of notes that he read from. So I'm going to take a page from Father Jerry's playbook, and it's one of those Monday nights where I needed to write my thoughts down. Inherent in my comments tonight is that the issue really is all about the ability to partner between the two cities. I think that's already been said. In my opinion, the actions taken by the Bloomington City Council to dissolve the Metro Zone, to exit from the Metro Zone, is really more than just about the dollars and cents. It really, to me, strikes at the heart of being good partners to one another, for truly working together as a metro area, choosing to ignore borders, and working for the good of all of our residents, which is something that residents ask us to do over and over again. How many times have any of us heard, and any of you elected officials out there, or maybe even just among yourselves, have said, why don't they work together on fill in the blank, fire, parks, pools, business, industry development. The list goes on and on. So if we could achieve that healthy partnership and a commitment to a common strategy, especially on a shared issue like developing our local economy, I think we would be much stronger together, which to me is really what the BN Advantage strategy is all about. Thank you, Mayor Harmon, for sharing from that strategy tonight. In the days leading up to the Bloomington's action last Monday, I personally urged several members of the Bloomington Council on two things. One, to consider a suspension of the agreement and suspension of the dollars sharing for a year so that we could address this calmly and with cool heads and the perspective that it really warranted, perhaps even in a joint council meeting. Secondly, I asked them to consider the way to alter this agreement, if an alteration in fact was necessary, that the way to alter the agreement was just as important as the end result itself. That was my way of saying to terminate it without a replacement was not going to be in the best interest of our relationship, and certainly didn't seem to be in the spirit of the meaning of the agreement as it was drawn up 30 years ago, that both parties should come together to discuss changes, even dissolution. Since the City Council took their action last Monday night, I favored a strong response like the one that we issued because we need a course correction. We need to course correct on the working relations between the two cities. For too long, our residents have watched what I'm going to call fits and starts of collaboration, and it's frustrating. Time and again, the city has shown to be unpredictable in their behavior and commitments to work together. Metcom goes back many years ago. Electronic recycling. Maybe even more recently, a failure to be fully coordinated on the programming for our entire community on the community-wide 1% sales tax increase. Their action on the Metro Zone was the straw that personally broke my camel's back. It was one more example of not really working together and staying together on matters that really count for our community. There may be members in this audience tonight, Bloomington's leadership, who might say, but we have different needs, or that Bloomington is more transactional than the strategic or relation-minded normal. Well, the last I checked, we are two cities that are basically joined at the hip with many, many borders. Some we don't even know when we cross from one to the other. Therefore, we cannot operate in a vacuum from one another. Family members, like Ms. Gaines said, have differences. Work team members have differences. But just like in those solutions, we have to respect and honor our differences and not hide behind them. We need to come together and focus on what we have in common and our shared visions for our community. In talking with so many Bloomington Alder members, I know that we want a lot of the same things for our community. So let's start by coming together, perhaps in a joint council meeting, with the first order of business to suspend the current MetroZone agreement with no strings attached, and then lay out the common goals that we have for our economic development for our entire community, and then ask the work group to re-engage in conversations to work out details of a revised economic plan. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That is to say, don't just wad up that MetroZone agreement and toss it away. Let's begin with that very forward-thinking document, add to it, modify it, and improve it for the next generation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fritzen?
Sure. Unlike Ms. Lorenz, I fought the urge to prepare remarks ahead of time. A lot of distractions for me, great distractions over the last couple of weeks, because every year I get to the privilege of doing the public address announcing for the girls' state high school basketball tournaments. So I get to see a great competition on a basketball court and get to help put our communities on display for those coming here to participate in those. And I've been doing that for over 20 years, and it's one of the highlights of my year. But there was a lot of distractions the last couple of weeks with all of this going on and the like, and so it would have been difficult probably to gather thoughts anyway. I appreciate Mayor Harmon's willingness to come tonight and to explain the genesis of the MetroZone. In my conversations with people in the community, it's clear that there is a lack of understanding among the general public of what the MetroZone is, and it's not an easy thing to explain briefly, but once you are able to explain it, then people get it. And I think Mayor Harmon did a good job of that tonight. It was a contract, basically. It was passed as resolutions in each committee, but it's basically a contract we entered into where 50% of the expenses, 50% of the revenues were going to be shared. And rather than set up a separate accounting of that, each community did their own accounting, and at the end of the year reconciled the books and distributed funds accordingly. It wasn't one community paying the other out of their general fund account. It was a reconciliation at the end of the year, and that's what happens in a 50-50 agreement. And we, you said forward-thinking agreement, and here we are 30 years later, where BN Advantage states it, in that document that this is the type of thing that should happen, and here we are 30 years ago. We did something we didn't realize. We didn't realize then really probably how great it was, but it has lived for 30 years in the community and served us well. I think maybe one thing we have taken for granted, and that is the amount of cooperation there is between the two communities. Ms. Lorenz referred to some specific things, but I think it's clear, and staff kind of cobbled together a list because we really didn't have a number on it, but 48 is what the number we came up with. 48 areas where we're in agreements with our sister city to cooperate on different matters at different levels, and so I think that's commendable. I think it's also interesting to see, because I believe we are very distinct and unique communities, one from the other. Yes, we're joined at the hip, but we are not the same communities. And when people talk to me about why isn't there just one government, I say that you step back from it and take a look at the two communities. We are not constructed the same in just about any measurement you want to put on it. And so we are distinct and unique, but yet, in spite of that, we've had these agreements in place, and that doesn't include our public safety agreement of mutual aid, which probably overrides all the others. That we're here to back each other up as needed. So I think that's important. I'm fine with let's pursue getting back to the table. Let's pursue talking, but let it be known that there have been a lot of attempts to talk about it in depth that were less than fruitful, and I think we as staff has been able to inform us off and on on the ongoing nature of this. We've been aware of those attempts, and what has been communicated to us is that those attempts to communicate at a deeper level were rebuffed for the most part. So let's get that clear. And it isn't just this one issue. There's a surprise that over this one issue, the town of Normal responded the way it did. And as you mentioned, Ms. Lorenz, that it isn't over just this one issue. And I don't think our response would have been at that level if it was just about the money, because it's not just about the money. You mentioned Metcom. And of course, that was several years ago, several changes in the leadership since that happened. But that's a change where three entities came together, the county, the town, and the city, to better serve the safety needs of our community, and one entity decided that it didn't work for them as well as they thought it should, and so they were pulling out. It didn't cost less to run Metcom after the fact. Those expenses, those additional expenses, were picked up by the county and the town. That's several $1 million. Okay, several $1 million. We were left to pay along with the county. So, that is pertinent to this discussion. It isn't just the one issue because, as Mayor Harmon mentioned in his remarks, this unilateral termination calls into question the reliability of the person, the group, that you're hoping to collaborate with, and that people expect you to collaborate with on a higher level. To me, the action expressed a willingness to put at risk the goodwill that undergirds everything we do together. It wasn't just a money grab, as some people have described it. It was an expression of a willingness to put at risk the goodwill that undergirds all we do in concert for the good of the community. It also put a price tag on collaboration. You know, right now it's at something under $1.2 million, because $1.2 million is the threshold. Anything above that, obviously, we're not going to collaborate because that may cost me too much as a community. So, you know, there's a price that's been established for this cooperation. And it also establishes for us a guiding principle going forward, and that is proceed with caution. I'm okay with let's talk. I'm okay with let's get our small groups that were trying to address this in the first place back together and see if we can resurrect this agreement so that we can set it aside. Until both parties agree that the Metro Zone still exists today, we can't set anything aside. You know, because one party believes one thing and one party believes wholeheartedly the other. So my understanding of Robert's Rules of Orders is at the next meeting, somebody who is in the positive vote can ask to reconsider a result. So, you know, there are 7 people who voted in the positive to terminate the agreement. I would call on at least one of those 7 and a second one to second the motion to make that motion at the next Bloomington Council meeting to reconsider the action. And then a positive vote could put it back in place so that we maybe then could continue those discussions. But until there's that willingness to cooperate, just like there was the willingness to put it at risk, nothing's going to happen, folks, because the action that was taken was a statement that says, we're done talking about it. There's no need for negotiation. That's what that vote said to the community. It wasn't just about the money, okay? To me, it's on a much higher level. And I think that's the thing that's the most frustrating, the most disturbing, and the most disappointing. I was at the table when we approved the Metro Zone. Thankfully, somebody who is a lot more intimately involved with it, like Mayor Harmon, is able to recollect details of it. I couldn't do that. I'm sure I voted in favor of it, but beyond that, I couldn't do that for you. But I was a wide-eyed, early 30-something council person at the time. I was still reeling a little bit from this Diamond Star thing that, you know, came to the community like a bulldozer. And, you know, I was not the youngest council person ever elected, but the second youngest at the time, as I understand it. And, of course, now there's a younger one. So you're getting your eyes wide open now, Mr. Preston. But I think, I think the other thing is, you know, we approved a budget tonight of over $100 million. You know, so $1 million may not seem like all that much, but you know, to generate $1 million in revenue takes a significant amount of retail sales in our community. And that's a source, one of our key sources of revenue, and that's one that's been flat or declining somewhat over the past several years. So that's not going to replace the $1 million. It would take the property tax off of hundreds of homes within our community, the average home in Normal. It would take the property tax of hundreds of homes to replace, you know, that $1 million of revenue. So we're not going to increase our property tax to recoup those funds, and I don't think hundreds of homes are going to be built in the next few years, considering the number of permits that were taken out in the past year. So the $1 million is a significant amount of money, and it's a significant amount of money that still resides in that budget that an adjustment will have to be made to, or several adjustments will have to be made over the course of the next several months to accommodate that. So that's when it gets to be about the money, is when you get down to the nuts and bolts of of adjusting that budget. And it's not an insignificant amount of money. We subsidize waste collection at a significant amount, but half of our waste collection budget, $1 million. Street operations, we're pumping a lot of money in this budget into improvements in streets, putting some of that sales tax revenue that we had hoped to maybe do some cooperative things with the city of Bloomington at work on capital projects on a year-by-year basis, so we can take advantage of that now. But, once you build a street, you gotta maintain it, and you have to be on top of it. And a significant part of, for instance, our street operations budget, $1 million. So these are important aspects of those core things that we do as a community that get put at risk to some degree by not having that revenue. We were counting on that revenue. We were hopeful that the talks that had been initiated were going to be fruitful, and they weren't. And Bloomington decided to go ahead and take the action they took. And I would call on them to use the mechanisms available to them to bring it back so that we can go back and renew the negotiations.
Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to former Mayor Harmon for providing that background as well. As I look even just in this room, I see a number of older men and older women, the mayor from the city of Bloomington, and it reminds me that one-on-one and in small group conversations, I feel I have very good relationships with my colleagues across in Bloomington. I know I am certainly not alone, and I find often that in one-on-one conversations and working together, whether it's through our roles with the municipalities or elsewhere in this community, we like each other, we respect each other, and a lot of good things often comes from that. And yet, for whatever reason, I would perceive that when you take a mayor, council, and administration from one municipality and put it alongside a mayor, council, administration from the other, for whatever reason, there have been times where there's been disconnect institutionally, though on a personal level. I don't feel like that often happens. And I don't know if it's that we are, in certain circumstances, speaking a different language. I don't know if there's, an institutional distrust about certain aspects of how both operate, how they proceed, how they make decisions. But no question, Bloomington and Normal can disagree without being disagreeable. I think that the municipalities, as was suggested up here before, have different strengths. They have different challenges. They have different dynamics. And absolutely, there will be things that will be good for one side of the line and not as good for the other. And that works across the board. And also there are times that probably both groups can point to the other for decisions made that were maybe not in the spirit of collaboration. I don't think either municipality has been innocent in that effort. And I don't think there's anything wrong with coming to the table and having people's beliefs for what is best for those that they serve be conflicting. I don't want to see either side get wrapped up in the process of working separately on certain issues that is not in the spirit of collaboration. Having open communication, being able to discuss our issues, and being able to work together to find compromise is an important aspect, of what I think the people of Normal, the people of Bloomington, the other entities that are involved in this whole spirit or this whole idea of collaboration, are other community entities. What they're counting on, certainly something that I hope we can get back to, and frankly, as someone who may be here, may potentially still be at this table 30 or 40 years from now, I hope that our decision-making process and our conversations together are able to be productive, it would be forward-looking, and that however the final outcome comes together, or whatever the final outcome is, I hope it comes together in honest and open communication. I appreciate all of the great work that has been done between the town and the city. There's been a lot. There's 40-some odd intergovernmental agreements between the two. But there's more than just the town and the city who are invested in this idea of collaboration. I think being at the table and at least having a conversation is doing certainly doing a service to them, to all of us, and to the people we serve. Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I've jotted some notes and did a lot of scribbling up here tonight. First, I want to thank Mayor Harmon for coming in and giving us not only an excellent history lesson, but reminding us of a couple of things. Reminding us that all good partnerships in the detail, and Decision 1, Decision 5, Decision 7, aren't always equal. That some decisions you might be a little bit ahead, some decisions you might be a little bit behind. But that in the totality, if we're good partners and we talk with one another and we negotiate, that we both benefit in the end. And I think for me, this is the crux of the matter. Of course the money matters. Thank you to my counterpart, Mr. Fritzen, for putting that into perspective from a line item in a budget. What does that mean for us as we consider this budget? What does that mean for streets and infrastructure and all those things? It does matter. I was part of the negotiation team. I was sitting at the table in the two meetings that elected representatives were at. I had a number of one-on-one phone calls with several of the Bloomington aldermen. We did make a proposal. I floated that proposal about placing a pause on this agreement, ceasing all financial transactions for a year, so we could put that to the side and actually get to the table and talk about amending it and moving it forward, or if we couldn't, about an amicable way that we can dissolve it. We did that. I was there. We put that forward. As Mr. Fritzen said, that was rebuffed. In that second meeting, when that proposal was officially delivered in a meeting, before we left the meeting, I asked my elected counterparts in Bloomington if they were going to go sell that to their council before I went and did work with the mayor on our council. And Mayor Renner and Amelia Burgess assured me that they would. I did not get a committal from David Sage in that discussion. We went back and we quickly got a unanimous agreement from our council that we'd be willing to press pause so no financial transactions would take place. Shortly after we were able to do that, I know Mr. Peterson reached back out to try to connect. I know Mayor Coos did as well, and we were quickly told that they could no longer talk to us about that. And that was it. Unfortunately, that's led to what we found out was a quick put on their agenda for a quick vote with very little discussion. Mayor Harmon mentioned it. Mr. Fritzen mentioned it. Part of what makes good partners is your ability to talk through difficult times, to agree without being disagreeable, as Mr. McBride said, without trying to make one right or one wrong, right? We both can have a perspective on this. We both can have elements of right and elements of wrong in our perspectives. I think we've lost sight of that to some degree. I think it's prudent, however, as I've been walking around the communities in the last several weeks, out talking to literally hundreds of Town of Normal residents, the single most asked question related to the Metro Zone was, why aren't we negotiating at the table? Why aren't the two councils sitting down and negotiating? If it's over, then why aren't we negotiating a termination? That's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that question. But by this unilateral action, by this unpredictable behavior and a history that we've heard of by Ms. Lorenz, of just some of the agreements, if this was just about this one agreement, and we were just narrowing this down to the last 4 months, we probably wouldn't be here. But elected bodies don't work in 4-month increments. We have a history with our partner. As Ms. Lorenz said, we're joined at the hips. And at some point, if it's not going well in that relationship, you got to stand up and you got to say something about that. And that's what we did in our response, I feel personally. Now, again, I want to underline, I'm an optimist. I have what I perceive to be good working relationships with all my council counterparts in the city of Bloomington. That includes Mayor Renner, even though we disagree on this. And I'm hopeful for that. I'm optimistic for that. I'm optimistic that we can agree to have different perspectives, but come back together and answer that question that I think all of our residents are really asking is, why aren't we talking? Why aren't we at that table? I feel that I'm still sitting at that table. Mayor Renner in his public comment said his door is open. He's willing to talk. I hope he meant that. I hope he does. I hope the Bloomington Council is willing to come back to the table and engage us, and I urge them to do that. Let's have this conversation. Let's finish this discussion. Let's amend it or terminate it, whatever we come to. Let's get this done to the agreement of both parties, as the agreement says that was signed 30 years ago. Let's do that and put this whole conversation so we can get back to the good work that all of our residents really want us to do.
For a number of years, I've been talking about there are cracks in the foundation in our community, and they're starting to split wide open. And we've had some economic initiatives in this community that have negatively affected our community. The realignment of State Farm, Mitsubishi leaving the community. These are things that I felt that we had to look at in terms of how do we develop an answer, how do we diversify our economy, how do we heal some of these cracks in the foundation that we have. Well, while we are working on the cracks in the foundation, somebody knocked a big hole in the roof, and the water is pouring in. And that is the baffling experience that we have had trying to keep the Metro Zone agreement in discussion and keeping the spirit of that moving through our community. We were told that the Metro Zone agreement was unfair and outdated. And when asked, what did that mean? How is it unfair? Why is it outdated? The answer was pretty much, it just is. It doesn't work for us anymore. It's tired, it's outlived its usefulness, but never any substantive comment about why it wasn't working. We were told to write an agreement without an end date on it is ludicrous. It's ludicrous to write such agreements. My response was to ask, then why have we written 4 intergovernmental agreements with the city of Bloomington since 2014 with no end dates? So those kinds of answers puzzled me as we went forward. Now, there was talk about how much communication has happened in the past 3 or 4 years about working on moving this Metro Zone agreement to modification or a dissolution. All the meetings since April of 2014, staff has assembled from their notes the number of meetings since April of 2014 to February of 2017, 6 meetings. 6 meetings. Total hours, 5 hours and 40 minutes. That's not collaboration. That's stonewalling. That's avoidance. We need to move this forward in a way that benefits our community in the manner that Bloomington Normal Advantage talks about, in the manner that our citizens are now demanding of us to move this community into a common direction. It is our responsibility, it is the responsibility of the electeds in the city of Bloomington to do that. And sometimes we're going to have to put our egos aside, sometimes we're going to have to put our budgets aside a little bit, but we have got to come to some agreement on how we're going to function as a region. There are plenty of communities in the United States that are doing exactly that, and they're doing it a lot better than we are. And we live in a world that's mobile, where people can go where they want. They can go for weather, they can go for jobs, whatever. They can take their jobs with them. So we've got to have a reason for people to be in our community. And I can tell you on the list of that, of reasons people come to a community, is not because it's sure fun to watch these two communities fight. They're not coming. They're not going to come for that. So, if you ask me today, is the Metro Zone agreement terminated? I would say firmly no. We've had one party that said it's terminated. I will read from you from the agreement just to reinforce to everybody. This agreement shall be binding on the parties hereto until canceled or revised by agreement of both cities and town on the 20th of January 1986. That has not been fulfilled. In my opinion, we've got work to do to resolve this issue with the Metro Zone agreement and get to common ground and collaboration and move this community forward. Mr. Peterson or anyone, comments further? Mr. McBride?
That's the danger of going first, right?
I'm sorry?
The danger of going first is you hear everyone go around. You know, and you touched on this too, Mr. Mayor, but just one other thing that kind of popped into my head. A question I've heard over the last week is why is Bloomington in such a hurry? And I don't know. You'd have to ask them. However, and this I think reinforces your point, Mayor, there is a sense of urgency for us to get our act together as far as growing and diversifying our economy. I mean, with every week that passes, other communities are doing it, and they are passing us. I've said many times I come from I grew up, spent the first 18 years of my life in a small city that had a great quality of life once upon a time, but no economic diversity whatsoever. It was all blue collar. 70s and 80s hit, those jobs disappear. Now it has the highest unemployment in the state. We can never take for granted where we are. And that's why this is frustrating, that we get bogged down on something like this and lose sight of the big picture. And that's where I wish we could, again, get back to work on the big picture long-term items.
Further comments? Ms. Gaines?
Just the one word, when I was speaking with someone who actually is in Bloomington, and they said, I'm really worried, this is very serious. This is extremely serious stuff. And I have to agree. This is not about, as people said, just the money. It's about trust and moving forward and being a place people want to live. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've had a discussion. If there's further, I think it's pretty clear where this council stands on going forward. And in parallel, here's the hard part. We're going to have to ask staff to take a look at a $1.2 million hole in our budget and come back to us with items. Hopefully we don't have to adjust quickly, but we may likely have to do that. So staff, you're going to have to bring some items to us that we can consider. As you will recall, and most of you were here on this council, When the recession hit, we went through the similar exercise. The council tried to do it themselves, and everybody had a different idea and a pet project, so we turned it back to staff and said, you deal with this day to day, you know how much one's going to impact more than the other. So we're going to ask staff to come back with that.
Do that.
Not in a big hurry, but take your time, be deliberate, but we're going to need to do that exercise as well.
We will.
Thank you. Before adjournment, we have comment and concerns, and I'm going to make one comment here. There's been a fair amount of discussion on our public comment process. We reached out to the Attorney General's office at the state of Illinois with the admonition from Corporation Counsel and City Manager, don't expect for a speedy answer. Again, they're right. We did not get a speedy answer. I've been talking with council members on this. There's been a fair amount of discussion on what to do. I am asking staff to bring an ordinance to the next meeting that will eliminate the 45-day wait period in our public comment. I want to change the 2-minute rule to 3-minute rule. I will say that I've always used the 3-minute rule and frankly didn't realize till most recently that it was 2 minutes in the ordinance. So we've always done 3 minutes in that. Reinforcing that comments will be germane to the agenda. We're very firm on that. So staff, if you could bring us back an adjustment on that ordinance for our next meeting. Further comments or concerns, Mr. McBride?
Just like to, as I think most people in the room know, that the director of the BCPA, Tita Salamone, passed away suddenly this weekend, and I just wanted to express our condolences to her friends and family, as well as the City of Bloomington staff. And Mayor, I've heard you say many times that people make communities, and she was an example of that. And you know, we should all maybe pause and thank her in our own way for what she contributed to our community.
Mr. Peterson?
One comment. I want to dovetail on something R.C. McBride mentioned at the outset when he was acknowledging Mayor Harmon and the good work that he did many years ago to lay the foundation of what we have today, which we're fortunate. There's another fellow in the audience that was part of that, and that's Dave Anderson. He drove all the way from Arkansas to be here tonight. And that's true. Now, I think he had another reason to come up here, but Dave was, as Paul will know, very, very instrumental in negotiating the original Metro Zone agreement. In fact, was interviewed on the radio this week about it, but also was extremely important to the Diamond Star project, and I think was kind of the person that kind of pulled everything together. And that was some real heavy lifting way back when. I came right after the Diamond Star, actually during construction, but I have a sense of how difficult that was to pull together. And Dave was kind of the orchestra leader of that project, so he certainly deserves our thanks, and I'm glad he's here tonight. Good to see you.
Ms. Gaines?
One last thing, as we've been talking about all of this, I don't want us to forget the shining star that we have coming to our community with Rivian. And we need to appreciate that, applaud it, be excited about it. Among all of the other issues, so to speak, this is really something that's a positive for our community. So let's not forget that.
Good point.
Mr. McCarthy?
I just want to remind everybody, as one of a few Irishmen on the council, that the St. Patty's Day Parade is
Careful
happening
now,
this
careful.
weekend in Uptown Normal. We had to do something to positive up this end of this meeting, but yeah. So come on out on Saturday. It's supposed to be crummy weather, but come on out anyway and get your green on and help us
You're
celebrate.
riding bikes, right?
So I'm looking around, I see Meehan,
Yeah.
McCarthy, O'Neill, McBride.
Pretty scary, isn't it?
Mr. Preston?
One more. Why not? despite maybe if yesterday went how a lot of us had hoped, I want to congratulate the ISU men's basketball team on a tremendous season. God, they made our community proud. They had an outstanding season. MVP of the Valley of the Year with Paris Lee, one of our seniors. Coach Mueller got Coach of the Year for the Valley, and we're very proud of them and look forward to kind of seeing how the postseason ends up falling for them.
Thank you. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I was going to say, I got to sneak this in quick. Call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines.
Aye.
Mr. Fritson.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we're adjourned.